So I started writing a reply regarding grammar to Kate, and I thought I'd start recording. So Anon had said, Justin proposed reading "Make Him Angry" as "Make angry him," angry being an adjective. That is what angry as adjective means. That's wrong. And then I had said, I'd given a long explanation. And my conclusion was that I think maybe some cases of post-noun adjectives serving as adverbs are basically shorthand adverbial prepositional phrases. The rest of the adverbial prepositional phrase is dropped because the really interesting part of something, like "in an angry way," is the angry part. So you keep that and drop the rest. And thus, an adjective can seem to modify a verb in cases where the adjective is standing for an adverbial prepositional phrase. And I guess in terms of this seem to, the issue is I don't quite know how to think about this because like an adjective cannot modify a verb, but if it's a shorthand, it can. If it's shorthand for something which can, then, well, you see, that's the analysis gets a little stuck in terms of like I think you have to say it to be really precise, and that's actually basically I get into that. But first, Kate. So Kate had said, this seems like an explanation on why I wanted angry to serve as an adverb in some way and modify make. Is that what you think now? I.e., do you think angry is serving as an adverb, as it's basically shorthand for an adverbial prepositional phrase? And I say, being super precise, I'd say angry is an adjective, and I'm going to add, which cannot modify a verb, but it is standing. And since I'm emphasizing that, I'll emphasize it in text. Standing for an implied adverbial prepositional phrase. You'll note that I made angry an adjective in my implied adverbial prepositional phrase. And what I mean by that is I said, when you make him, for translating you make him angry into a sentence that makes my theory or interpretation clear, I said, when you make him in an angry way. Angry is modifying way. I say, you can look at sentence in various ways. In various ways. Like you can just go labeling parts of speech. For example, you can just go labeling parts of speech. That might be a reasonable exercise in various cases, like for someone new to English. For a parts of speech labeling exercise, angry is an adjective, full stop. But it is standing for or representing this implied adverbial. So in terms of how the sentence is operating grammatically, I'd say make is being modified by this implied adverbial, which angry is representing. And then I say, so Kate asks, what about the object complement idea? Then I looked at object complement stuff again, and the examples seemed pretty different than make him angry. For example, I prefer my coffee black. Black is clearly talking about a quality of the coffee. What kind of coffee? The blanket kept the pig warm. Rewritten, this would be something like, the blanket maintained the pig in a state of warmness. I like that rewriting. So I think that's clearly talking about the pig's condition. So for make him angry, the OC meaning objective complement, interpretation might not make sense. Doesn't seem to make sense. Yeah, and Kate's basically saying object complement seems like a really broad category. Is it that she's asking about the principle, is it that any time you have words that follow the direct object and describe or rename it, you can classify those words as an object complement? I mean, potentially, I need to think about object complements more, but I guess for this particular example, you make him angry. What we've figured out is that the adjective is standing for something that's not modifying the object. So it would not be an object complement, because to have an object complement, you need to have a modified object, and that's not what's happening. The modification is elsewhere in the structure of the sentence. So Kate has this example. She announced the winners of the game. Of the game is a prepositional phrase that describes winners. So, does that make it both an object complement and a prepositional phrase? Is prepositional phrase the more narrow and precise categorization, and object complement the more broad categorization? Do we need both categorizations? I think I see the need for object complements in cases where they are renaming nouns. And I guess Kate means, right, this is like a literal, by renaming, we sort of mean like specifying the name. Like, up until this point in the sentence, all we know is that this guy hates his uncle, and then at this point in the sentence, we know that the uncle's name is Pete. So she sees the point of having the designation object complement for this, but she's not sure about other cases, especially if we already have basic categorizations that do the job. Right, so it's interesting because this ThoughtCo site has a definition that says an object complement is a word or phrase, usually a noun, pronoun, or adjective. A note it says phrase, that comes after a direct object and renames, describes, which is incredibly broad, or locates it, also called an objective complement or an object or objective predicate. Now, prepositional phrase, I mean, if you go through the analysis, winners, right? She announced the winners. Winners is the object of the game, says which winners. So it's an adjective or an adjectival prepositional phrase, which comes after a direct object and renames, describes, or locates it. It definitely describes it. So I see Kate's point. I think it's a good point. I think it's a good question. And particularly, even the better question is like, do we need this categorization? Is it like, does it help us? Is it useful? So basically, I just said that Kate's prepositional phrase example falls within the definition for objective complements that I found, and I see her point. I'm going to have to think about this more. I think this is a good email. So I'm reading this anon post on the make him angry sentence. As parenthetical phrases should set off parentheses or commas, not dashes. I think you can use M dashes and it's totally fine. and standard. And I know it's called a parenthetical phrase, but there's, unless, I mean, I guess a noun could have some objection that's not, some criticism of doing that, of the use of em dashes that's not stated here. But I did find this Microsoft style guide, for whatever that's potentially worth, which says that em dashes add more emphasis, which, if I recall, Kate had responded to my criticism by saying she thought it would add too much emphasis. So that would make sense if it's adding more emphasis. I'm not quite sure I agree, and I'm not sure I have a clear principle of how I've thought about using em dashes, but I almost think I could have been using them wrong, obviously, but like the apparent parentheses seem like the stuff inside parentheses in a way seems more separate to me, which is like which sounds like more emphasis in a way. Like, I think of em dashes as when you need to put something in kind of an aside, kind of a parenthetical, but you don't want to quite interrupt the flow as much. So even this example, like the information in your spreadsheet, numbers, formulas, and text, is stored in cells. This is just like, this seems almost like an aside to me. Now, obviously, this is more of the thing I'm talking about is more of a style thing than a clear-cut grammatical thing. So I think it can be harder to figure out, which is why I'm talking about it, because it's tricky and I want to figure out writing style stuff more. But as far as I know, and I found several websites which said em dashes totes cool. Grammarly says em dashes can save the day. Another punctuation would be awkward. For instance, em dashes can replace parentheses at the end of a sentence or when multiple commas appear in a parenthetical phrase. And it gives an end of sentence example here and compares it with using parentheses. So and it's what else does it say? It says em dashes are more emphatic than colons. Well, that's colons, so that's a different. I really care about the parentheses comparison. Is grammarist. Em dashes set apart parenthetical phrases or clauses in a sentence. See, this is the explanation that I like. So of course it's the right one, right? That's a joke. That's not a good principle of approaching questions. But perhaps a useful way to think of the em dash is as a pause of parentheses with somewhat more emphasis than a comma and somewhat less emphasis, I assume, than parentheses. Yes, so Microsoft is wrong as usual. And this, here are a few examples. Okay, let's look at the examples. Steely Dan's title track to FM, A Justly Forgotten. Oh, this is a long. Yeah, this is music writing often, like entertainment writing can get kind of long. Let's look at another example. I don't like that one. Since 2007, the consensus of the economic establishment, bankers, policymakers, CEOs, stock analysts, pundits, has been catastrophically wrong. And this would be weird in parentheses to me. I would default, but this is a bit different because this is a list. I don't know. Both Dagan and Diskin opposed military action against Iran unless all other options, primarily international diplomatic pressure and perhaps sabotage, have been exhausted. These all seem like things that are renaming the thing that comes immediately before. So is that the principle to these? Oh, here's a good one. In other cases, M dashes can go where parentheses would be too strong a break in a sentence. Oh, but it's the same sort of the president's nephews, sons of his late brother. Yeah, it's another thing that's renaming the So this actually made me less certain of my use of M dashes. That I started off like, oh yay, this sounds right. Now I looked at the actual examples and I'm like, Now I'm extremely suspicious. So Anon rewrites make him angry into an form where angry is clearly serving as just an adjective. And he says, in this rewrite, angry is clearly an adjective modifying him, but this doesn't work, it's an incomplete sentence. Make that angry person what? Something is missing. For example, make angry him sad, make angry him get a job, make angry him get great again. Those are complete sentences. Also, if angry were an adjective, then it would be optional. You could just delete it pretty harmlessly. So I agree with this so far. The rewritten sentences the example sentences do seem incomplete. Or do seem complete. Whereas make angry him is incomplete. So then, also, if angry were an adjective, then it would be optional. You could just delete it pretty harmlessly. Modifiers are optional in general. An exception is an adjective that's a complement after a linking verb. Another exception is no or not. I agree with reading an implied be. For example, make America be great again. The reason you can imply, so this goes to the core of part of my issue. The reason you can imply a whole bare infinitive in this case is because that's how the word make works. It's standard, well-established English. It's not just implying an arbitrary ad hoc word. That was my concern. It's following a normal pattern. So I just say, I guess that your points about incompleteness and the optionality of modifiers also apply to my implied adverbial phrase interpretation. So it was really trying to save angry as a modifier, but could not get the job done. I think Anon continues, I think the alternative interpretation, rather than an implied word like being, is that the word make takes two objects or something. Basically, you could say the meaning in the implied be is simply built directly into make. I think that's what I was trying to do in my head without quite realizing it. It's trying to jam some beiness into make. The pattern is like make xy, and you can say it means make x be y, but you can also say that make means to transform x into y. Right. I was thinking the specific additional verb I was trying to jam into make was like elicit or something. I think something along those lines. I might have said on a previous video. Anyway, an advantage of reading an implied be is that it fits the standard English convention of verbs having only one object or complement. I don't mind compound objects like dogs and cats, which are harmless, because in that case the object is a single group. There aren't really two objects. So I just asked, okay, so to be clear, is your reading of, actually let me just say, okay, makes sense so far. So to be clear, is your reading of make him angry something like the following? Subject, you, verb, make, object, the whole phrase, him to be angry, with to be being implied, and the object clause is an infinitive clause with the structure subject, him, which still bothers me, verbal, to be, complement, angry. Alright, I think I may be starting to change my mind on this. We'll see. Exciting adventure of grammar. It's very interesting. It's interesting when you start to try and think of it more in terms of principles and less in terms of a bunch of names and special rules. So okay, we sent that one. Now, going to end the video here.